407 years ago, our fathers set forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, if you're all familiar with the history of our great nation, you might recognize these powerful first lines to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Delivered in 1863 in the midst of the Civil War, it's considered some of the best public oration in our nation's history. Now, I'm up here, I can't really hope to compete with Abe's great speech, but I'd like to take the opportunity to share with you just a little bit of information about our 16th president. While I'm here, we'll talk about Abe's life, his time as president during the Civil War, and his legacy and the kind of impact that he's had on our nation. Getting started, Abe was born in 1809. Soon after he was born, his family moved to Illinois from Kentucky, where he spent the rest of his childhood. According to History.com, we know that Abe Lincoln was a very intelligent child. Even as a young boy, he spent all of his free time reading and trying to learn as much as he could. Now, unfortunately, Lincoln had to start working early in order to help support his family. So he didn't have time or the resources for a proper education, but he still continued his own independent studies. And after years of going through old law textbooks, reading through old courthouse cases, he was actually able to get a law license in Illinois, which was incredible for his time. That was just a couple years after he actually found his first place in politics when he was elected to the Illinois state legislature. Moving forward, he eventually went on to meet his wife, and they got married, which is obviously a happy story, but together their lives were not easy. As well as being the first couple of a nation under so much distress, they both also suffered from chronic depression their whole lives, which was a constant battle for them. And they stayed close to tragedy, as only one of their 4 sons lived to adulthood. Despite the highs and lows of his life, Abe Lincoln was an extremely passionate man, and he continued to pursue his political career. In 1846, he was elected to the United States Congress and served his term out there. Unfortunately, he was not a popular congressman, and his opposition to the Mexican-American War and his general disdain towards slavery kept him from being reelected. After this, he took a small break from politics to live with his wife. But it really didn't take too long for him to get back into the game, and in 1856, he ran for the United States Senate. He didn't make it, but he used this opportunity to establish himself in the community. And through his eloquent speeches and his clear passion, he established himself as a respected member in the political community. And in 1860, he ran for president and was elected. Many people consider Abe Lincoln to be the greatest president in our nation's history, and I think for good reason. He was put in a position where he had to bring the country back together. After his election in 1860, several southern states decided that after his election in 1860, several southern states seceded from the Union, creating the Confederate States of America, throwing the country into a civil war. Now, this was tragic for the entire country, and hopes for a quick and easy war were shattered at the Union loss at the Battle of Bull Run. Now, surprisingly to many, Abraham Lincoln, despite his inexperience, proved himself to be a capable wartime leader, and quickly set himself and the Union ahead in the war. Now, as part of his war effort, Abe Lincoln had to make a controversial and unprecedented move. He chose to suspend several civil liberties guaranteed by the Constitution, things like the freedom of press and a couple others. This obviously was very unpopular with the people and the government, as they recognized it as Lincoln exercising power that he legally did not have. But luckily for us, Lincoln stayed true to his values and continued doing whatever he deemed necessary to get the job done. He famously said that he didn't get the point of preserving a country's constitution before the nation itself. In 1865, in early April, after Abe Lincoln and his generals led the Union on a decisive trail to victory, the last major Confederate army surrendered in a small Virginia courthouse, concluding the war. Now, many people say that the saddest part of Abe Lincoln's career is that he didn't get to see the country that he fought so hard for truly recover after the war. On April 14th, 1865, while watching a play with his wife, Lincoln was shot in the back of the head, and the following morning, he succumbed to his wounds. This was tragic for the entire country, but it really locked in and made people recognize how valuable he was. Thanks to the excellent article by Professor Burlingham, we know, in the excellent article by Professor Burlingham, it's described, the professor says that in many ways, Abe Lincoln can be credited with holding our nation together. He was put in a position where he had to literally bring the states back together and after this terrible war. He made some unprecedented and technically, according to the Constitution, illegal maneuvers, suspending civil rights. But after his death and many years into the future, people recognized that he was doing what needed to be done. Now, although it's extremely impressive, literally bringing the Union together after this terrible and tragic war wasn't Abraham Lincoln's only major contribution to society today. One of Lincoln's other major contributions was the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, passed in mid-1863, the Emancipation Proclamation set the Emancipation Proclamation was a major milestone towards the death of slavery, and was a huge deal. Now, in many ways, the proclamation was lacking, but you can't argue that it didn't set the path, that it didn't, oh no, where am I here? That it didn't lay the foundations for the 13th Amendment, which upon its ratification immediately freed hundreds of thousands of slaves. Now that we've talked about Lincoln's life, his time as president, and his incredible contributions to our nation, I'd like to thank you all for joining me for this little presentation. As I'm here, I know that I appreciate learning a little bit more about the great man whose statue we see in the Commons every day.